Ask this question: which of the following is false? Every subset of irreflexive relation is irreflexive. So whenever such a question is given, it is always better that you take some examples and work on them. So by looking at the examples, you'll be able to answer it better. Even though your intuition says something, but try to cross verify with some examples, okay? Even though you can answer it directly. Let me take some example here. Let us say a set A equal to AB 1 2 3. And now let me define a relation R1 on set A in such a way that R1 is irreflexive. So let me say 1 comma 2 3 comma 1 maybe 2 comma 3. It is irreflexive. Why? There are no diagonal elements. Now they are saying that every subset of irreflexive relation is irreflexive. Now if you try to take any subset using this relation R1, that will definitely not contain diagonal elements because the original relation itself does not contain diagonal elements. Are you getting the logic? See this. Now take any subset from this R1 that will definitely not contain any diagonal elements. The reason is the original set itself, it does not contain diagonal elements. So what can we say? We can say that every subset of irreflexive relation is irreflexive directly. I hope you are getting the point here, right? So since whatever subset you take, since the original set does not contain diagonal elements, the subset will not contain diagonal elements, and so every subset of irreflexive relation is definitely irreflexive. So it is true. Now let's look at the next one. Every superset of irreflexive relation is irreflexive. So what do they mean by that? Every superset of irreflexive relation, which means if you take this irreflexive relation, you try to add some elements to that. Whatever elements you add, they are talking about every superset. Whatever elements you try to add, they are saying that the resulting relation is going to be irreflexive. It is false, isn't it? Why? Because if I try to add the element 1 comma 1 to this relation R1 to make a superset of the relation R1, then the resulting relation is not irreflexive. Therefore, if you try to make a superset which is going to include the diagonal elements, then definitely it is not going to be irreflexive, and so it has to be false. So it is false, right? And the next one is, if R1 is reflexive and R1 is irreflexive and R2 is irreflexive, then R1 intersection R2 is irreflexive. So what is that they are saying? We have two irreflexive sets. Now what can you say about intersection? So let us say R1 intersection R2, right? So R2 is also some irreflexive set. Okay, so one thing you should understand is R1 intersection R2 is definitely going to be a subset of R1 or a subset of R2, isn't it? R1 intersection R2 is definitely going to be a subset of R1, as well as R1 intersection R2 is definitely going to be a subset of R2. Now we already know that R1 is irreflexive. Now what can we say about a subset of R1? A subset of R1 is also going to be irreflexive. So what does it mean? If R1 is irreflexive, R2 is irreflexive, then R1 intersection R2 is going to be a subset of R1 or R2, and already we know that a subset of irreflexive set is going to be irreflexive. Therefore it is true. Now let's look at the fourth point. If R1 and R2 are irreflexive, then what can we say about R1 union R2? So see this. Let us form one more irreflexive set. Let me say 3 comma 2 and maybe 1 comma 3, something like this. If these two are irreflexive sets, what can you say about R1 union R2? What can you say about it? So R1 union R2 is definitely going to be irreflexive, because if this one R1 does not contain any diagonal elements and R2 does not contain any diagonal elements, how are you sure that they does not contain diagonal elements? Because they are already irreflexive. If this does not contain diagonal elements, this does not contain diagonal elements, by merging these two, the result does not contain diagonal elements, and so the R1 union R2 is irreflexive. Got it? So I have given you some examples, and you can even form a lot of questions on this. Maybe you can even think of it like this: if R1 is, if R1 is irreflexive and R2 I am not saying anything about it, if R2 is a relation, then what can you say about R1 union R2? So what can you say about it in general? If you see this, R1 union R2 will be a superset of R1, isn't it? If R1 is a set, if I union it with some other set, then that is going to be a superset of this. Now we cannot say that every superset is irreflexive. Therefore we cannot say that R1 union R2 is always irreflexive. It may or may not be irreflexive depending on what R2 is. Got it? Therefore R1 union R2 is always irreflexive will be wrong if they didn't say anything about R2. In case if they say that R2 is irreflexive, then it is right. Okay, so that is what has happened here. Both are irreflexive, then definitely it is irreflexive. But if they don't say anything about R2, then we cannot say anything about the result. Got it? So using the word always will be wrong there. Now let us say R1 is irreflexive, but then they didn't say anything about R2. Now if they are asking about R1 intersection R2, what can you say? Now we know that R1 intersection R2 is definitely going to be a subset of R1. Therefore we need not know anything about R2. We can directly say that always R1 intersection R2 is going to be irreflexive. Why is that so? Because even if we don't know about R2, we know that every subset of a reflexive relation is going to be irreflexive, and since R1 intersection R2 is going to be a subset of R1, right, it is always true. So I think you know why it is subset of R1. We know this, right? If there is a set A and if there is a set B, A is there and B is there, and if it is A intersection B, A intersection B is a part of A as well as A intersection B is a part of B. Therefore A intersection B is a subset of A and it is a subset of B. That is the rule I am using here, right? And then we know that every subset of irreflexive relation is irreflexive. Got it? So in this case we can say that even without knowing R2, it is always, we can use the word always, R1 intersection R2 is always irreflexive. But in this case I cannot say that it is always irreflexive without knowing about R2. In case if R2 is irreflexive, then it is always irreflexive. In case if it is not irreflexive, then it will not be irreflexive. Got it? Okay.
Hi, if you are planning to do masters, then doing masters abroad is better than doing masters in India. I'll give you all the reasons. So, first reason is, out of 1 lakh students who take GATE every year, there are only 500 seats in old IITs. So all the IITs put together have an acceptance rate of 0.5%, and IITs, universities better than IITs, they have very good acceptance rate like 30%, 40%, but all the IITs put together have an acceptance rate of 0.5%. And if you are working hard to get into IIT Bombay's ranking is 177 and IIT Roorkee's ranking is 400. If you are happy to get into IIT Roorkee, then getting into universities better than IIT Roorkee is easier compared to getting into IIT Roorkee. And looking at the salaries for computer science, for software jobs, if you have done your masters in computer science in US, the salaries are ranging from 80 lakhs per year to 1.2 crore per year. So even if you take an average of 1 crore per year, your savings will be much higher than the salaries in India. After taxes and your cost of living, you can easily save 40 to 50 lakhs per year. And in India, the maximum jobs that you get is around 30 lakhs. So your savings will be much greater than the salaries in India. And these are all the services that we provide. University shortlisting. So depending on your profile, we will shortlist what are the universities that you have to apply, and statement of purpose building, and then LOR guidance, and GRE and English test assistance, and education loan assistance. So you don't have to have any collateral, which means without any security, now you can get education loan. Getting education loan is very simple these days, and whatever the amount of fee that you have a range of universities. You can apply for 10 lakh universities, 20 lakh universities, or 50 lakh universities. But whatever it is, you are going to get complete education loan, and you can pay off your education loan in 1 year after you get a job. And then we do visa assistance, mock visa interviews, and then connecting with the university alumni. So now you might ask why we should join Game of Visas. So the answer is we have 90% success rate, 99% success rate. And these are all the destinations that we guide the students to. So we guide students to any country that you want to go. So now it is not just USA. We guide to UK, Germany, Australia, Canada. So we guide students to all the countries. We work with all the destinations. And if you are interested in going abroad, you have to just drop us a message on this WhatsApp number 9494 555 454. Okay, thank you.